So I got an email this week from a reader, a longtime reader, and he's getting ready to go into medical school. And part of that process is you have to go through interviews, and for the most part, there's kind of an enforced dress code that comes with that. And basically, his question ties into a lot of things that I think are related to suiting for men in a lot of different areas. The same question is applicable for guys who are looking to go into the fields of law or finance or anything else where really a conservative suit is necessary. And so I figured, even though I did already respond to him in an email, this is a good enough question, and it's applicable enough across the spectrum that it's worth answering for more than just him. So his name's John, and as part of this whole email that he sent me, the crux of his question comes down to, do you have any advice on places where I can read up on the basics of suit fabric? I know that different tailors will carry different fabric makers, and much of the choice has to do with feeling the swatches in person. However, is there a tier system of suit fabrics? Short of Googling the fabrics offered at the tailors I may use, what would you recommend I do to learn more about this pretty extensive part of bespoke clothing? Really, it's a great question, because if you're not in the world of suiting and you're just kind of jumping right into it, it can be kind of hard to tell the difference between a quality cloth, even if it is quality. Does it communicate the right kind of thing? How does the pattern work in regards to the environment in which I'm wearing it? All of these kind of basics. And so let me break it down and give you a quick rundown of the primary things. The first thing to pay attention to is the type of the cloth itself. For the most part, if you're looking for kind of a workhorse suit that's respectable across the board, you want something that's 100% wool. There are other really fine materials that can be blended in with that for something that skews a little bit more casual. You can do something along the lines of like a linen or a cotton, and then when you get a little bit more refined, you can go into the realms of cashmere or silk. But a lot of these end up taking the suit away from kind of that business world and resting it more on either the really casual kind of suiting like what I'm wearing right now, which is a wool linen blend, or something that's a little bit more elegant and it's reserved for more evening wear or other regards. The other thing that you need to consider with this is, for a lot of you guys, when you're just kind of getting your first suit and it's supposed to be a good workhorse that kind of spans the whole spectrum, if you get it with a material that is either too noticeable in the texture that it provides, like cotton or linen, or it's not as durable because of how fine the cloth is, like with cashmere and silk, you end up sacrificing the versatility and the durability, so the overall wearability of that suit. So first thing I would recommend to John and to other readers in this similar situation is to focus on something that's 100% wool. I don't even really feel like I should talk about the idea of polyester in suiting, but just to emphasize the point, don't get anything that's considered to be a wool blend or a wool poly blend or anything that has any polyester in it. The way that it drapes isn't as clean, and eventually after enough wear you start to get this really bad synthetic sheen to it that it just makes it look like it's cheap. And so if you're already investing in something, go all the way and get something that is 100% wool. So the next thing to pay attention to is the super count, and this is more applicable to John's question in regards to this tier system. What the super count is it's basically, without diving too deeply into it, most suits are 2-ply. So the threads that are used as they kind of loom and they weave the cloth, it's 2 different strands that are twisted together, and how tightly those strands are twisted is what gives us the super count. The more tightly they're twisted, the higher the super number, and the softer, more buttery the cloth is going to feel. The downside to that, or the cost of that, is one, it's going to end up monetarily costing more, but then two, because that cloth is a lot softer, it's not going to be as durable. So cloths will range anywhere from something that doesn't register on the super count up until you get above the super 180s, and it usually goes in increments of 10. And the sweet spot for most guys is anywhere between the super 120s to the super 140s. You can get from the 110s to the 150s and still have that work. But then once you get beyond those extremes, that's where you start sacrificing either the luxury and the softness of the drape that actually makes it look like it's not a cheap suit, or the durability that you want in a good weekly wear suit, as opposed to those really fine cloths are phenomenal. You have to have 5 or 6 suits already on rotation, because otherwise you'll burn through, especially in the trousers, you'll burn through those in a year's time, just because they're not intended to be worn weekly, let alone 3 or 4 or 5 times a week. Okay, next one is the weight. Depending on where you are and depending on where the cloth is milled, it's basically measured in either ounces or in grams. And this kind of translates to, it's how heavy the cloth is, how thick it is. And what that does is that gives us how wearable it is in a given season. You can get stuff that's really, really lightweight and it's perfect for the summer. You can get stuff that's really, really heavy and it's ideal for the winter, or you can find something that's kind of right in that sweet spot, and then that helps give you this idea of an all-season suit. So as far as ounces go, it's anywhere from 9.5 to 12 ounces. For grams, you're looking anywhere from 285 to 360 grams. And it's a pretty decent spectrum. You can go a little bit heavier than those and still have it be something that's considered to be all season. If you go too much lighter than that, then you're definitely skewing into the very spring and summer specific cloths. So pay attention to the weight and make sure that that's something that gives you an all season cloth, because that kind of versatility. This jacket that I'm wearing today, as I'm recording this, it's the middle of August, and so this is ideal for this time of year. I'm not going to be wearing this in 6 months, but I have plenty of suits that I will wear every single week, regardless of the time of year, because the weight allows me to do that. Next thing to pay attention to is the weave. When you want something that's going to be versatile, and especially in John's situation where we want something that's a little bit more conservative, you want a weave that is pretty minimal as far as the visual texture to it. Something like a good worsted wool, maybe a bird's eye, a shark skin, something where there's a little bit of a subtle pattern to it or a subtle variation to the weave that you can see. If you're within, I would say maybe 2 or 3 feet, but as soon as you get further away from that, then it just looks like it's a solid suit. If you get beyond that, you get into things like basket weaves or hop sacks, or even to some extent a herringbone weave. Then it ends up leaning a little bit more casual. The texture becomes too visual, which makes it lean more casual. And then you also have the compromise of, because it's more visible, the weave is more noticeable, then you can't wear that suit as often without people knowing that you just have one suit that's on rotation. For example, if I were to wear this jacket every day, and this is the same thing that's applicable to pattern, which is the next step, but I can illustrate the point here. With this jacket, because of this pattern, and even without the pattern, just because of the weave that's with that, if I were to wear this every day for a week, it's just like, okay, Tanner, you've obviously got one jacket that you wear every day for a week, and it becomes very noticeable. However, if it were something that were just a really minimal weave that's not really very visually textured, there's no melange to it, is the French word, and there's no pattern to it, then you can wear that same jacket 5-6 days a week without anybody ever really noticing, especially if you switch it up by wearing different ties or different pocket squares. So pay attention to the weave, make sure that it's something that's more minimal, it's not as visual, and that it ends up leaning a little bit more formal. You can get away with some texture, but don't go overboard. Patterns, same thing. There are certain patterns that are more business friendly or considered to be more conservative than others. Pinstripes, blend plaids, some nail heads, which is kind of a difference. Some would argue that's a weave, others would argue that's a pattern. There's valid cases both ways. But really, pattern, you're better off with a solid. Stick with something that, just for that same reason as far as versatility goes with the weave, and because of the conservative aspect of it, stick with something that's solid. Color. This is a big one. I've hit on this a ton of times on the site itself, and really this should just kind of stand to reason. Go with either a navy or a gray. A lot of men will default to black or even a charcoal, and for the most part, especially black, it's too formal. It's something that should only be worn at an event like a funeral, or if you're wearing it after dark to something like a black tie event. For the most part, if you end up wearing black, you end up looking like you're part of like the serving staff or a ballet, as opposed to looking like you're dressed appropriately, and that's certainly applicable when you're going in for interviews, whether that's for school or job or anything else like that. Gray and navy still have that same level of, they're conservative, they're subtle, we're used to seeing them, and so they don't really stand out, and then they're also extremely versatile. You can get away with almost any different color of leather you want with a navy or a gray suit. You can go browns, blues, grays, black, I mean anything really that you want to pair with, and obviously that color aspect is something that's applicable to how conservative an outfit is as well. But you've got versatility that works with you on that. And then the last thing I would say for John or for anybody else to pay attention to is the country of origin. I've been in suiting for the last little more than 3 years now, and one thing that I've been able to learn to distinguish, and it's hard to quantify, it's really hard to be able to explain, but very well woven cloths, and these largely come from Western Europe, especially from countries like Italy and from England. They just fall in a way that's very different from the stuff that you get from Eastern Europe or from Asia. And they may even use different kinds of wool that come from other parts of the world, like merino wool or Tasmanian wool or anything else. But just the country of origin, as far as where the cloth is milled, the heritage that comes from that, the experience and the expertise that comes from that, it makes for a better looking garment. And again, it's hard to quantify, but if you go put up a $200 suit that's even made in the same facility as a $2,000 suit, and the only difference is not in the quality or the type of the construction. They could both even be 100% wool, but they come from different mills. The more expensive suit should, and for the most part will, drape more cleanly. There'll be more body and more flow to the cloth itself, just because of the country of origin and the heritage that goes into weaving that cloth and getting it to fall the way that it should. So if you're like John and you're ready to take the step into going into custom suiting, pay attention to those aspects so you know you're getting the most bang for your buck, both in the terms of quality and in the terms of getting the most life out of a conservative suit, especially a conservative business suit for what you're after. I really like his question, and so I would like to offer this as something that I will do periodically and as I get other good questions. So if you have anything that you would like to know, something that you've been wondering and you haven't found it on my site or on other sites or other YouTube channels or anything, submit a comment below, because I love the idea of being able to answer these questions and help you guys out with different things. It doesn't have to be related to suiting. Obviously, suiting is kind of my bread and butter, but anything related to style, let me know. I'd love to answer your question and be able to give other guys advice so that it's not just applicable to you as the guy who's asking it.